guys, it's Aoife from Words of Clover and I'm here to do my July wrap up. So the first book that I read in July was Lawyer for the Dog by Lee Robinson. This is a fun short novel about a woman who is a lawyer. She ends up getting hired to kind of be this go-between / lawyer for this dog who is stuck between these two people who are getting divorced, and she ends up having to kind of go into the case as like an impartial person and basically kind of figure out where the dog's best interests are, whether it's with the wife or the husband in this relationship. And you see a little bit about her life as well. She's an older woman, I think she's in her 50s. She has an ex-husband who's actually the judge of the case, and he's the one that hires her in, and he seems to be going through a lot and is trying to attach himself to her again. And it's just a kind of fun short novel that I really did enjoy. I thought the writing was really nice in it. I love the writing in it. I just loved the dog, and he was really cute. I think his name is Sherman, and he was like a little miniature schnauzer, and he was really adorable, and I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. I also read the volume 2 and volume 3 of Heartstoppers by Alice Oseman, which is a very popular kind of comic book at the moment about these two boys called Charlie and Nick and their relationship. I really enjoyed where both these volumes went and just how it explored a little bit more about both their relationships and just some individual issues that they were dealing with, such as Nick's his own kind of journey with his sexual identity, whether he was gay or bisexual. And then we also see Charlie deal with a little bit more of anxiety, and we see some other issues that he is dealing with. And I think it was all done really well. I think the cast of characters around Nick and Charlie, their friend group, and the people that start being introduced in these comic books as well are all just lovely, and some of their own little like kind of side romances and stuff, and it's just so much fun to read. This is just the kind of book series that every time I'm reading it I just have a massive smile on my face because it is so cute. I gave both of them 5 out of 5 stars because how could you not? It was just so adorable. The next book I read was a historical fiction, and it was The King's Concubine by Anne O'Brien. This is a really interesting historical fiction, and it's about a woman that I never really knew about previously. It is set in 1362 around the reign of Edward III, and we are following him as he starts a relationship with this young woman called Alice Powers, and she's about 17 or 18 years old when she starts this relationship with him, and I think he's in his 40s or early 50s, so there's a massive age gap. And we are following Alice from the time she is quite young. She grew up in a convent, and there's very little known about Alice and who she really was. But one of the things that is down in history about her is that during her kind of reign as the king's mistress, she developed a lot of wealth, and she ended up buying a lot of properties and was kind of in control of a lot of properties. And I feel like that's just so interesting in a time, this is what, 1362, and it's a time when obviously women couldn't really be independently wealthy, and it was very hard for a woman to be independently wealthy and a woman to be independent in her own right as well. And in a way, Alice Powers kind of became this strange kind of property mogul around this time, and I just love that, and I think it was really interesting to find out more about her, even if in a fictionalized sense. And I did like Anne O'Brien's writing in this. It did remind me a little bit of Philippa Gregory, who I also really enjoy, and Elizabeth Chadwick. If you are into like books that are very fast-paced and full of action and a lot of plot, this isn't really a book for you. This is very slow. We're just following her life. She doesn't really do that much apart from being in court, and we just follow the ups and downs of court life. So it is a very slow book, but I still did enjoy it just as a slower read and learning about someone who I didn't really know about before. Again, it's really interesting about Alice Powers and how she is portrayed, I think, in history and in history books that are, you know, obviously written by men who probably disliked a woman being in power and disliked a woman having the ear of a king and probably being able to influence a king, particularly as he got older, and relied on her for more things, and how that eventually was turned against her, and how she ended up getting slurred with some of the most dangerous things a woman could be accused of, things like witchcraft and all sorts, and how the powers that were trying to take control after King Edward, how they turned on her and really, you know, tried to destroy her life because they felt that she had too much power. And I think that's just really interesting, seeing how that came about in this book, seeing how she responded to it. There were times when she definitely responded to things really poorly. She is a very solitary person. I actually kind of felt a bit sorry for her at times because it seemed like she didn't really have a friend in the world. She was very solitary. She was very independent. She only relied on herself. She was afraid, I think, to trust anyone really. And at times I did feel really sorry for her as a character because she was just always on her own. And yeah, it's just kind of sad. I think that Anne O'Brien put at the back of this book that I wanted to read because I thought it was really interesting. She said, I've made use of the outline of Alice's life as far as we know it. As for what we do not know, I've used some historical imagination and make no excuses for doing so. Alice was accused by contemporaries of being a greedy, rapacious and wanton woman, wheeling and dealing to achieve a fortune in land and jewels for herself. If even half of this is true, she must have been a remarkable woman, and that's exactly how I feel. So I did really enjoy this one. I give it a 3.5 out of 5 stars. If you really enjoy historical fiction, slow court based fiction, I would definitely recommend picking. So the next book I read was an audiobook that was Heartbreak Hotel by Deborah Moggach, who also wrote the Best Exotic Marigold Hotel, which I actually had no idea was a book, so that was really interesting. This one was okay. It's about this old man called Buffy, and he's kind of in a retirement age himself, but then he ends up inheriting this B&B, this kind of ramshackle B&B from an old friend of his, and he decides that he wants to try and run it, and you kind of get a load of kind of range of different people coming in through his doors. This one was okay. As I said, it was quite actually interesting for audiobook. I felt myself intrigued and I felt myself not wanting to turn it off at parts. I got like really into the story in terms of it being an audiobook listen. So I do recommend it in that way if you were going to read it. But in terms of the story itself, I felt like there were some times in this book where one of the characters would say something or act a certain way, and I felt a little bit uncomfortable about it, and I don't know why. There were just some things that I was just a bit like, oh, okay, little things. You can't really pinpoint anything in particular, but I definitely remember some points in the book where I was a little bit like, oh, okay, I don't know how I feel about that. You also kind of get a real snapshot of a lot of people. You kind of see about them before, you kind of get a snapshot of their before and then a snapshot of them during their stay at the hotel, and they kind of never come up again then after that, and it's a little bit, I just felt like it was a little bit lacking in places. It was just a fine read. It wouldn't be one that I would really recommend. It wouldn't be one that I'd be raving about. But as I said, it was actually quite an enjoyable read in terms of an audiobook listen. So I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. And then I read The Gutter Gareth Ryder Hanrahan, and this is actually really interesting. This is a book written by an Irish author, but this is a high fantasy book. So I always love finding more fantasy books written by Irish authors because I feel like there's just not enough of them out there. So I get really excited when I do read one, and particularly ones that are as good as this one. This book is set in a city called Gurdon, and we are following 3 different characters mostly in this book. We are following a girl called Carrie, who seems to be this thief, but she actually comes from a well-off family. We are following a character called Rat, who is something called a ghoul, so he's actually not quite human. And then we are also following a character called Spar, who is suffering from something called the stone sickness, which means that he is slowly almost becoming, it looks like he's made of stone, and one day he will probably wake up and he won't be able to move, and it will just be a very slow death, and it is not a very nice way to go. It's very contagious, so people tend to stay away from him, and they end up doing this kind of job for these thieves, and they end up getting, they basically kind of get set up, and they end up getting arrested for this, and it basically sparks this whole thing with this city, which is to do with these gods that are slowly being awakened, basically cause the end of the world in a way, and these characters are center in this. This is a world where gods are very much real. They come to life. People can be saints where the gods kind of bless them with certain abilities. People know there's like far off in other countries and other cities near Gurdon, there's something called the Gods' War, where literal saints and gods are warring. It's just that Gurdon hasn't really attracted any attention yet, and one of the things about these gods waking up is that they could attract attention. So there's a lot at play in this book. There's a lot going on, and it is a little bit hard to understand at first, but once you kind of get into the flow of it, it's really, really great. The city in this comes to life really well. It reminded me a lot of the cities in The Lies of Loch Lamora, Foundry Side by Robert Jackson Bennett. That in a lot of ways it feels very much like our world. It feels almost quite modern. With this one, there is like a university town, there is a harbour, there are like, you know, you have like the religious order, you have like politicians and merchants and things like that, and then you have almost another governing order near the bottom, which are like the thieves. And there are also things like almost like trams and things like that make kind of almost modern. And then you have all this thing with the gods and the religions, and a lot of history there, and a lot of things to dig into that I can't even begin to start explaining in this video because I probably won't be able to do it properly. You just have to read the book to find out. But I really enjoyed this one. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. As a fantasy, I think it was really, really good. If you enjoy high fantasy, this one is definitely something for you. I think you would have to be kind of a seasoned fantasy reader to really enjoy it. I think if you're new to fantasy, it might be a little bit complicated. But if you like books like Foundry Side and The Lies of Loch Lamora, this one is really good. Like, you're following thieves, you're following a god war, you were following this crazy, you were following possible prophecies, and yeah, there's a lot going on in it, but definitely worth the read, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Then it was the reading rush. I'm not going to go into the books that I read in the reading rush because I kind of talked about them all in my vlog, which I will leave linked down below, but I will just go through them really quickly. So I read Blameless by Gail, Carriger, which I gave 4 out of 5 stars. I read Here's the Beehive by Crossan, which I gave 3.5 out of 5 stars. Then I read The Eagle of the Ninth by Rosemary, Sutcliffe, which I think I also gave 3.5 out of 5 stars. I started but didn't finish during the reading rush How to Be Nowhere by Tim MacGabhann, which is the second book in the Call Him Mine duology, I guess. I read Call Him Mine in March for the Irish Readathon, and this is a really interesting book set in Mexico, and we are following an Irish journalist who is investigating these crimes that are being carried out by this drug cartel, and he starts doing this after his photographer slash boyfriend is brutally murdered for investigating this. This is kind of the follow on from that, but to be honest, I think Call Him Mine can be read as a standalone. I don't think this really gave much more to the story that we got in Call Him Mine. I think this is just a fun story that the author wanted to write for the characters. Call Him Mine is very much based on the author's true life in a way, because he was a journalist in Mexico City, and I think some of the inspiration from Call Him Mine he received from hearing stories from colleagues of his and things that they had seen, things they had heard happen, where How to Be Nowhere is kind of, I think it's inspired by kind of the classic car chase movies. So this one we're following the character again of Andrew, who is the journalist, and he ends up getting caught up in something that is related to what happened in Call Him Mine, but he ends up having to go on this kind of journey to I think they go to Guatemala, and he ends up dealing with a lot of people who you would never think he would be dealing with in the first book. He does a lot of things that I would never have thought that the Andrew in the first book would do, and I felt it a little bit unbelievable, and I didn't particularly like some of the things that he did and some of the way he was thinking. It didn't feel very much like the same character. And then there's a lot of action in this book, and there's a lot of gunfights. Like I felt like every few pages we were getting this massive gunfight, and then to be honest there is a lot of body horror and body gore in this one, which I'm normally fine with, but there were some bits in this book that did make my stomach turn a little bit, like people getting their eyes burnt out, getting drilled in like shotgun wounds, like really gruesome, really descriptive stuff that just wasn't that nice to read. I do like Tim MacGabhann's writing. I just don't think this added anything to the story. I don't think this particularly, I think he just wanted to write a fun, exciting car chase novel, and I think, you know, I just don't think it added anything to the original story, so I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. And then I read Clap When You Land by Elizabeth Acevedo, which is a novel in verse, and a lot of people have been talking about this book this month. A lot of people have read it and really enjoyed it, so I will just really quickly say what it is about. It's about two girls who, one of them is in Dominican Republic and one of them is in New York. They share the same father, but they actually don't know about each other, and they don't know about each other until their father dies in a really tragic plane accident, and their whole lives are kind of blown apart with grief, and then blown apart again when they find out their father has kind of almost been leading a double life in a way. This novel is just so beautiful. It's kind of this exploration of these girls' grief, the loss of their father, kind of trying to figure out who their father really was. So a lot of beautiful moments when they find out about each other and they find out about their sister, and there are some gorgeous moments in this book when they meet each other for the first time, or when they see each other for the first time, and they kind of, in a weird way, they both feel like they've gotten their father back in a way by seeing him in their sister, and I just think it was so beautiful. Some of the passages in this book I absolutely loved. I'll leave my Goodreads review below where I have some of my favourite kind of passages and lines and stuff that I liked, quotes in the book. But yeah, this one was just so gorgeous. Absolutely loved every single moment of it. You know, I didn't quite get the real emotional, gut-wrenching moments that I got from the Poet-X, but I still really enjoyed this book, and I just thought there were some really important points in the book, particularly around kind of in the Dominican Republic. She kind of talks about how the lack of opportunity there is for young people, particularly young women, and the danger a lot of young women are in when particular men kind of start eyeing them up for specific things, and how a lot of girls, like, they don't have this second family in New York or their dad in New York that they could go to. They have nowhere to turn, and it's just there's just a very interesting commentary on that, about that lack of opportunity, how dangerous it is for particular people. And yeah, I just really like that being highlighted and learning more about that as well. So I gave this a 4.5 out of 5 stars and absolutely loved it, and 100% recommend. And then the last book I finished in July was Being Hospitable by Meka James, and this is a short novella that I heard about from Riley Marie. She did a reading vlog recently where she recommended this book, and it's only a short novella, it's only about 70 pages, so I decided to grab it, and I'm really glad I did because this was just a really fun book. This is about a girl called Kiki and another girl called Charlie, and Charlie is about 22 and Kiki is 29, I think, and Charlie is Kiki's best friend's younger sister. So this book is kind of a play on that trope of falling in love with your best friend's little sister, except it's female romance. And Charlie comes to stay with Kiki for a few months while she takes part in this internship program. And Charlie has a massive crush on Kiki and is determined that she wants to try and seduce her. And Kiki is always kind of quite like fancied Charlie as well, but she's always said that she's off limits. It's just a really fun kind of novel between the two of them. There was a lot of sexiness in there and a lot of cute moments as well. I think near the end of it there was no real like ups and downs in it. The only real obstacle was the fact that, you know, the older brother that was involved, and that was kind of, you know, that didn't end up being a really big thing at the end of it. So there was no kind of big thing that they had to actually overcome. It was all fairly easy, and which is also nice as well to have, I guess. And it's only a novella, so there wasn't that much like space, I guess, to explore anything else. So I gave it a 3.5 out of 5 stars. I did enjoy it, and for people who are looking for some short nice reads, female reads that, you know, are a little bit smutty as well, I do recommend this one. This one was good. So that's everything I read in July. Please let me know what you guys have read in July. If you've read any of these books, what your favourite July read was, I would love to know, and I'll see you guys again next time.